bit of go, then I think they fail miserably.
Okay, now the biggest question, I think, in the Premier League this season, or at least the most fascinating story, is Pep Guardiola and his attempt to come to terms with the Premier League, which is really, at the moment, a serious failure. Didi, these guys, their performance at Everton was unbelievably messy, and that's twice in a month, against Leicester and against Everton, two pretty ordinary sides. They've conceded 4 goals and looked really almost like a pub team.
Yeah, that's right. No hopers. I think they were 20 or 30 minutes in, they were 3-0 down at Leicester, and they conceded 4 at Everton, a team that's really not been firing and been struggling really for most of the season. It is a fascinating story, because he came in with a huge reputation. Everybody thought, all that money that's been spent, they won league titles, they won the FA Cup, they won the League Cup, but now is the time to push on to put a marker down in the Premier League and also in the Champions League. And so far, it's a big misunderstanding, you have to say. I think what happens with him, I don't think he's a big man manager. I don't think he's got a relation, but I hear from Bayern Munich, he hasn't got a relationship with many players or any players, and also to the staff in the training ground. I don't think he's the most likable guy.
Right.
And I think it's a big thing. That's one thing. I think if you wanna really get boys, the team on your side, I think you need to have that. I don't think he does it with the way he works on the pitch. But if that doesn't work, it creates problems. Then the other thing is that he's very brash with journalists. When he gives interviews, he seems to be a bit, disillusioned. He doesn't want to speak to people. And I think you saw with Klopp that if you're nice to these people, obviously there comes a time where they have to criticize you, maybe ask for your head or for the management to sack you. But I think they give you more time, and I think it all comes together now. I think he's not got any relationship with anybody in the country, and I don't think he's got the best relationship with his players. And then he brought a keeper in who's a calamity. There's no two words about it, or no two ways about it. I think shot to goal ratio, I think he's the worst in the Premier League. I probably would agree with that. And then he's got a defence where I think he's lost faith in a lot of these players. I think Otamendi, how Valencia ever charged 30 million for him, I do not know. And how City paid it, I do not know. I think Stones is a capable player, but he needs experience next to him. Fullbacks are all over 30. And then when you've got a bad defence, I think the forward line lacks as well. Because if you haven't got balance in your side, I think it also affects the midfielders and the forward players. And that's where they are at the moment. It's really astonishing how bad they have been in the last 2 or 3 months.
John, I'm inclined to stick my neck out. I don't think this guy is the real deal. Given his record at Barcelona, less so I think at Bayern Munich, I don't think this guy is a top coach.
I wouldn't agree with that, Eamon. I mean, he won 14 major trophies at Barcelona, and you don't do them that way by not having something. I think what happens with football, Eamon, wherever you go, there's a different challenge, and he's certainly facing a different challenge now to any of the challenges he faced before, because he's gone into Manchester City. They don't have the players that he inherited at Barcelona. He doesn't have the players that he inherited at Bayern Munich. So he's got a different job to do, Eamon. And he's not doing it very, very well. There's no doubt about that. I doubted at the start, or criticised him at the start, when he came in with the philosophy. His philosophy, we're talking about his philosophy on football. And Joe Hart was the first victim of his philosophy, where it seems anyway that he got rid of Joe Hart because he wasn't good enough with his feet. Now that is ridiculous and wrong. The 2 fullbacks playing in midfield early on was wrong. So there's a lot of things in his philosophy that's wrong. Now whether he learns from them or not remains to be seen. I felt a little bit sorry for him last week because he looked desperate to me. He looked like the whole thing was coming down on his head, which it is. But again, I'd give him a bit more time to see if he can improve on what he's doing or realise the mistakes he's making. Because again, if you go back a long time with Ferguson at Old Trafford, 3 years before he got it right at Old Trafford. Now, I think he's making a lot of mistakes. I think he's made a lot of mistakes since he's come in. Now, what I'm waiting to see now, will he learn from those mistakes? Will he put them right? Will he get better players in? Will his emphasis be on different things? Will he get rid of the playing it to full-backs in dangerous positions at the back? If he continues to do that, Eamon, there's no doubt he will be a failure. But I would give him a little bit more time.
Now, Didi, just to remind ourselves about Guardiola, at Barcelona, he did inherit a fantastic squad of players, and he did obviously a good job with them. At Barcelona, they were the best team in the league. At Bayern Munich, they were the best team in the league by a mile in terms of personnel. Here he's in a situation where he really has to work and make decisions. He's already spent 140 million, and that wasn't particularly well spent either. So am I mad to say he's got a lot to prove?
Yes, he's got a lot to prove, but I hear people saying he's been found out. I'd give him the time. He's here for 4 or 5 months. He's probably still learning. Maybe he underestimated the Premier League. And I think he's got to show now that he can adapt and he can change, because we mentioned it on here time and time again. You can't play out from the back all the time. There has to be the odd long ball when you're under pressure. There's nothing wrong when you hoof the ball up the field and play in the opposition's half. And I think this is a test for him now. Really adapt. He's got his philosophy, which is fine. But he's not got a team as dominant as Barcelona was, as Munich was. There's a lot more competition in the Premier League. And this is a big test now. He's got to adapt. He seems to be
saying, Didi, in his rather sharp interviews with the media, that this is the way I play, i.e. the passing game, and that's it. And he also said after one game a couple of weeks ago, this may be my last coaching job. I want to do other things in my life. Now, that smacks to me of arrogance. Pardon? He did go back on it, yeah. Yeah,
he did go back. He said he was misinterpreted. I wouldn't read too much into that. But
I just want to ask you about his time at Munich, because you're very close to there. You played for Munich and you worked there every week. Was he regarded at Bayern Munich as the Messiah when he left? As opposed to when he arrived. Well, when he arrived...
Yeah. No, they were very dominant in the league. You know, they won the league by the end of March. They wrapped the league up twice in 3 years. In the Champions League, they lost in the semi-final to all the 3 Spanish teams, rather disappointingly. So he would have been the Messiah if he won the Champions League. But the way he handled himself, the way he talked, and the way he treated people were afraid of him. And obviously in England, they're not. And if you look at the team in Barcelona, in Munich, they did outscore teams. You know, if you've got Messi in your team, I think us two would have half a chance to win the league there.
Yeah,
Eamon. And but what he's done in the Champions League, you know, I wouldn't fault the man for what he's done. I think he's a fantastic coach. He proved it. Well, this is the ultimate test now, because he inherited, as you say, Championship and Champions League winning sides. And I think in England, you have to base your team on defence. If you look at the most dominant teams in the last 10, 12 years, there was Mourinho with Chelsea, with John Terry, Cavallo, Cech in goal. You had Arsenal, as good as they were going forward. They had Sol Campbell at the back. At the start, they had Seaman in goal. And they had Toure there, and they had a fantastic defence. Vieira sitting in front of the back four.
Yeah, and Ferguson.
In England, if you want to win the Premier,
Ferguson had Vidic in his last championship-winning team,
Ferdinand.
And of course,
Ferdinand. Yeah. So you need to base your team on defence in England, and unless he does that, unless he realises that's the way you've got to do it here, because you can't outscore teams in the Premier League. It doesn't happen. Because there's too much competition, and even when you go to Watford, even when you go to Burnley, you know, it's a dogfight, and you can't just play out from the back. because they've got the bit between the teeth, and they close you down and they make it as awkward for you as possible, which doesn't happen when you go to Getafe or when you go to Augsburg in the Bundesliga, for that matter. So you've got to base your team on defence. So far, he's not done it. I think they need at least one centre-back, maybe two. They need to change the keeper. I wouldn't be too surprised if Caballero is between the sticks very soon, because I think it's got to change something. Needs something which may trigger a reaction from the team, because the way they're going at the moment, it's only going one way, and that's downhill.
John, you're prepared to wait and see. I suppose we should all be prepared to wait and see how he does. But what interests me, and I'm sceptical about, is the way he's reacted to the problems. Not with humility or even silence, but with an aggressive sort of, attitude to journalists.
Well, only very, very recently, Eamon. To be quite honest, when I hear the journalists talking after matches, I'd get very impatient with some of the bloody questions they ask as well. I know he has a job to do, but I think the idea of having to meet the press immediately after the match when you've been beaten, it's the last thing you want to do. So I wouldn't worry about his press relationships. I mean, if you look at Mourinho's
hold
press
on a minute now. Hold on a minute, John. There was a BBC interview in particular, a very polite interviewer, no trick questions, no sort of aggression, and he just insulted a guy.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's right, Eamon. That's wrong to do it. But look at all the other interviews he did beforehand. I mean, that since he came here, I think he's been very, very polite. I think that was a bad interview. Of course it was. But look at Ferguson over the years with the interviewers, and Mourinho when it suited him to do it. I would forgive him that. I wouldn't say that's part of his failure at Manchester City. I mean, his failure at Manchester City,
it betrays a certain arrogance. That's what I'm saying.
Well, they all have an arrogance, Eamon. All the great managers have arrogance about them. They wouldn't be great managers unless they had that bit of arrogance in them. Look at Ferguson with the press over the years, Eamon.
Yeah, no, I know all about Ferguson and the press. That's what it was. He was a bully.
What was he like after the press? Yeah, well, you wouldn't call Guardiola a bully. But a lot of the managers have done it over the years, but it hasn't interfered with their results. I mean, in Guardiola's case, his results are terrible at the moment, and certainly I would criticise him for the way.
It's his reaction, John. You saw the game against Everton at the weekend.
Yeah.
And I mean, a top coach would not have had his team set up like that with Zabaleta wandering around in midfield.
That's a different argument, Damon. There's no question of that. I don't agree with what he does. I think on the pitch he's been very, very poor, and he definitely does have to change. Whether there's an arrogance about it, I mean, there probably is, but all the great managers have an arrogance about it.
Well, let me change the word. Let me change the word. Mourinho has a certain arrogance. Ferguson had it. An unpleasantness in the way he dealt with that journalist.
Yeah.
Sarcastic.
That's wrong.
Yeah.
Well, that's wrong, but Ferguson was sarcastic, and then Guardiola's, Mourinho's been. I wouldn't be too much concerned about his arrogance. I mean, I'd be worried about what he does on the pitch and his philosophy with the goalkeeper and all the various things that he's done. That's what's leading him to the position he's in at the moment. Not his actual relationship with the press. I would be more worried about what he's doing on the pitch with the team, which is not good at the moment. He's got to have to change. If he doesn't, then he will be sacked. There's no doubt about that. But his relationship with the press, well, I think it was a bad interview. He shouldn't be doing it.
Okay.
But he's not the only one that's done it.
Let me come to something more substantial to both of you, Didi and John. Didi, in his defence, it should be said, should it not, or noted, that he inherited a terrible squad of players because they wasted so much money. I'm thinking of Mangala, for example, Fernando. I mean, some terrible players they had.
Yeah, not to forget Otamendi. Yeah, no, I agree with you. Yeah. I think the recruitment's been terrible. If you
before
look at
he arrived,
the money Spurs. Yeah, before he arrived. If you look at the money Spurs have spent on their starting 11, and if you look at the money they have spent on their starting 11, and some of the players who've already been shipped out again because they were well short of the standard required in the Premier League, then you have to say they burned an awful lot of money. Yes, that was before he came in. I think the big question mark is Stones now, who has been in the team all the time now over the Christmas period because he's not been performing. But I think for a young player to improve and develop, I think you need experience and you need good players around him. And at the moment, if I look at that defense, if I look at the keeper, if I look at Osamendi, if I look at the fullbacks who are, Zabaleta have been a tremendous servant for the club, but the others all the wrong side of 30. And I just don't think Stones has got enough support. I wouldn't give up the ghost on him. I think he's a very capable player. I think he's a very good player. But at the moment, the way they shape up at the back, it just doesn't suit him. And they probably need to spend money again to compete with the top teams. But don't forget, when you talk about some of these players being bad players or not good enough, they still managed to win the league, I think, a couple of times in the last few years. They won the FA Cup, they won the League Cup last season. So, they still picked up titles along the way, even though some of these players didn't perform to the standard they were expected to. And if any other manager would be in that situation now, I know he gets a lot of stick at the moment, but I think if Pellegrini was in that situation now, or in that league position, if he was still in charge, I think he would probably be 1 or 2 games away from the sack. Whereas with Pep, and I'm not saying he should be sacked, I think you've got to give him at least this season and then see whether he adapts and how they play next season. And they still could have a good end to the season, even though at the moment it doesn't look that way. But yes, he just has to show now that he's willing to learn. And I slightly disagree with John. It's all right being harsh with the media or say the odd thing and show who they speak to. But it's different when you're winning. When you win, you can do things. When you lose, obviously, it triggers, it's like a catalyst. Everything comes back twice and 3 times and 4 times as hard in the written press the day after. So I think he's got to be careful in that respect as well. Because as I just mentioned, when you have to realize that there has to be a relationship. They only do their job, these guys. And I agree with John, the odd question shouldn't have been asked or should have been asked differently. But at the same time, I think he's got to realize that it's a together and they only do their job. I think he's got to learn, he's got to adapt. Is he willing to? The way he's talks in the press, the way he still defends his style of play, I think there's a big question mark at the moment.
John, do you think he'll get it right in the end?
I don't know, Eamon. I think he's a big job to do and a lot of changes to make in his philosophy and the way he's looking at the game to get it right. I don't think he's a silly guy. You have to look at it, Eamon, as a football man, and say, this is not working. But if he continues to do what he's doing, obviously it won't work and he will have to go. So I would bet that he will change, give him a couple of windows to get better players in, players that he really wants, change his philosophy, which other people have had to do in the past, because it's not working, Eamon. It's definitely not working. So he has to do something about it. And I'd be very, very surprised if he doesn't realise that and do something about it.
Didi, is it your gut feeling that he'll... let me put my own view first. I think he won't. I think the English Premier League experience will expose him, and I don't think he will conquer it. That's my belief. What's yours?
The signs at the moment, the way he does speak, the way he does behave, I would probably go along with you.
Okay. Now,
I hope he does, because it's a fantastic club. It's a fantastic setup. They've come a long way, even though they did spend an awful lot of money. But it would be a shame if he were to go with a whimper in the Premier League. And I wouldn't give up the ghost on him and the team. But I agree with you that the signs at the moment are that he sticks with his philosophies, and clearly they're not working.
Okay, just a final question for the week. That's it.